Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a very creative and fun night ahead of us. I'm going to close our sponsor screen, but we're very thankful to our sponsors as well. Okay, there we go. And my name is Caitlyn Shea. I am the Events and Media Director for Walt Whitman Birthplace. And if you're not familiar with us just yet, we are a museum located in Huntington, New York, which is on Long Island, and you can come visit us in person to see the house that Walt Whitman was born in 202 years ago. You can take a tour with us, and you can always join us online as well. We're getting ready for our hybrid events, which means Zoom and in person in the fall, so we can't wait for that. So those of you who are joining us from a distance, don't worry, this will still exist, this will still happen. And I always want to start all of our programs by saying thank you so much to everyone who's able to donate or able to purchase tickets like you did to be here tonight. It means so much to us. Your membership, liking our Facebook posts, our social media posts, it all means so much to us. We're so happy to be growing even after this difficult time. And it really means multitudes. Your presence everywhere also means so much to us too, from anywhere and on our social media, on our Zooms. Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. And I just want to say briefly a little background of how this workshop came to be. It's really a passion project between Karen Demaro and myself. It started with an image, which you will see in this presentation that we'll be showing. And Karen had sent it to me. She knew I would appreciate it. I am a visual artist and she's a performance-based artist. And I don't use a lot of text in my work. So when I saw this image using art and text, I was very impressed by it. I had a lot of questions, which Karen very kindly answered. But we started to say, you know, that's not an easy thing. It's not something that's taught in art school necessarily. It's sort of, I think it's more innate for Karen. For me, it's always sort of a struggle if I'm trying to do something with that. So between the two of us, it really grew into its own workshop. And I'm so honored to be working with Karen. She's done other programs with us about performing poetry as well. That's on our YouTube. So if you're a poet, that's a must see, I would say, absolutely. So right after this, jump onto our YouTube and watch that video coming up right after this. And Karen Demaro is a multimedia performance artist whose goal is to activate the art in everyone. And she absolutely does that. She let me just say that sentence instead of her beautiful bio. So thank you, Karen, for letting me abbreviate just a bit. But she absolutely does. I get off the phone with Karen and I'm like excited to create. So, so happy we're doing this tonight. I'm going to hand things over to you, Karen, and then I'm going to share my screen so everyone can see the beginning of our presentation here.
Well, right back at you, Kaitlyn. The joy and delight of this has been marvelous. I'd like to welcome everybody. Deep thanks for coming. This is magnificent. Alice, special shout out to you, Noreen, and the people I know and care about. Here's the deal. We should call tonight some questions you might ask. That's a line from Mary Oliver, the great poet. And it's really a series of questions I've been asking for about 20 years. And I'll give you a little bit of the history as we go through why I'm obsessed with this conversation between words and image, because it's not done often, and it's especially not done well. Because doing it well is so hard, it practically drove William Blake, the great poet artist, out of his mind. So if it's too hard for Blake, I encourage you to just poke away at it. That said, it's a deeply rewarding experiment. So tonight, we're going to go through a series of just experiments. I suggest really strongly you play. Don't try to finish anything. Don't try to be good. Try ideas you don't like. If you don't like any of the ideas, do whatever you want. We're going to do a series of different things, a fairly long slideshow to give you examples that Kaitlyn and I both really love about how this medium can work. Then we're going to do 3 exercises. Actually, we're going to do a slideshow, and then we're going to do an exercise about what the slideshow discussed. And we're going to break everything down into tasks. In my opinion, there's 60 or 70 tasks I can name in dealing with art and poetry and conversation. And they're things like value? How do the words have a say when the visuals are so strong? So there's a lot of things. We're going to give you 3 to try out. And I will, in the chat, point you to resources and places where once you decide what you want to do in your own skill set, I can point you on the journey that I've been on for decades. So we're going to start, but the format of the evening is about 30 to 40 minutes of slide and example, then a 10-minute exercise. And the auditors are more than welcome to try it. We have a great sized group. And then we are going to go into, I'm just waiting for the PowerPoint to come up so that I can read it. And then after that, we're going to have another slideshow. And then we are going to have another exercise. After the 3 exercises, which should take about probably an hour and 20 minutes, we can talk, you can share your work. We are going to ask, because it's a complex series of things to navigate, that you hold showing your work until after the 3rd exercise. But if you have questions, by all means, put them in the chat. And I will answer the questions while people are drawing. So how did this all begin? It began with this image. And we all have an inner iconography. Just like our lives have a soundscape, you know, a series of songs that we connect to our growth and development. Most of us have a series of images and pictures. If you're over 50, you have a whole different inner iconography than people who were raised before the internet. But this is the one that started me. So Kaitlyn, if you would just move forward, because we do see this slide again. Can everybody see the slides? And Kaitlyn, would you just check to be sure everyone can see everything and that we're coming through? I'm going to give you a chance to wait because sometimes people can't see the slides. And Noreen, I will take care of you, dear, in the auditors, because I know you're not seeing things.
Okay, yeah, you know, also I'm just gonna let everyone know, so Zoom pops up if you're on a computer where everyone's sort of listed on the side in a row on the right side. So you can move that box with your mouse there. You can drag it away if it's blocking anything for you. On my screen, it is a little bit like some of the minutes are gone there, but we'll also be reading it, so I think you'll be all right. But I just want to let everyone know that, yeah, you can move it. And then on a phone, you should be good.
Okay, so this is just the overview, which I just said to you, and the time frame, because time becomes very important in this particular medium, as you will see. Making decisions quickly, really important, because otherwise you'll get nothing done and do what I've done for years, spin your wheels trying to decide what to do. So we've made a time frame to spare everybody all of this. I will say the whole presentation is visually dominant. We will have a section at the end for all of the wonderful poets we have here and writers, but we chose to focus on the visual. And more about that later, but sorry, artists and writers, you'll get plenty. Don't worry, but it is visually dominant because the way the world is, we see things. And the way the world is now digitally, we don't have the time or depth to read things, nor the patience. So that said, we're going to go to the next slide and I'll explain what I mean by inner iconography. So when I first encountered this slide, I was young, 12 or 13, and it was the way I saw the world. A combination of pictures. You have to realize I was raised in a heavy-duty religion where illuminated missals and manuscripts and stained glass windows were big. So when I saw this, I thought, oh, I get it. And I then became obsessed with the poetry. And so I actually do know all this stuff about Holy Thursday and how this is a song of experience rather than innocence. You don't need to even know that part of my journey. Let's just look at this visually. This is what's called a ragged edge with a clean white, these are my names, by the way, with a clean white insert. What Blake never discovered, FYI, is how to make the print dark enough so that it could be read. So if you can't read the print, you and he had the same problem. And he worked on it for 30 years. Now the next image is another part of my iconography, the Book of Hours. So when rich people wanted to show off that they had money, they paid monks to do these things. And inside is scripture, holy texts, and the monks regarded this as a sacred practice, making these. I recommend it as a really beautiful way to use an illuminated letter and a border. The poor people also, as you may or may not know, in the Middle Ages, were taught by pictures because they couldn't read. So this is pre-reading, or about the time that Gutenberg was invented in the press. And I noticed that there's an Aboriginal piece of art in back of one of our participants. The Aboriginals did not do it with visuals. They did, but they did it with song lines and sounds. So that's just an interesting aside. Next slide. I think we just went backwards, darling. There we go. Just an example of a book of Kells, which preceded the illuminated manuscript. And all of these little creatures have meaning. We will talk about symbols in the last part of the presentation, but there's griffins and fish, which is a sign of Christ, but it's just a cool way to get people to look at something. So this is a decorated or illuminated capital, and it's a great way, if you are a poet or writer, to call attention to a word so that people know where to look. The hardest thing in doing this blend is, where do we enter the beautiful page or the painting or the work of art? That's called traffic flow, and we'll talk about it later. Next slide, please. My favorite painting in the entire thing we're going to do tonight, for many reasons. When I went to Japan and lived there for 3 years, I again recognized a spiritual practice to art. And this is the absolute unification of motion, sound, poetry, brush painting. It's completely spontaneous. It happens to be by Otsuyu, who was both a haiku poet and an incredible sumi-e calligrapher. But I would just like to point out some things, and if I'm pretty didactic, do forgive me, but I love it so much. Notice how the deer meshes with the mountain. Notice how the calligraphy creates a mountain shape. It doesn't even matter that you can't read Japanese. Notice the swirl of line and the glorious kind of back and forth. You look at the deer, you look at the print, you look at the seal. And what we want in one of these conversations is, we want this motion back and forth, this conversation. We kind of want to linger at something, but we want to stay on the page. So thank you, Otsuyu, and we will see a few more examples of Japanese, because the Japanese did haiga, H-A-I-G-A, and they have been working with this form for 400 years. So, next page. This is, and I'm so honored that Kaitlyn mentioned this. This is my painting that I did at the time of George Floyd, when everything in my life seemed superfluous to the horror our nation was going through. And I will say that this was one of the few times in my life where I did something quickly and out it came. And what I wanted here was for the figure, which was a blend of things I stole from the newspaper, to be looking at the text. And the text is simply the events of what happened that day, when people were pushed and people were shoved. And what it does with the white space between, white space, I think you will find, allows for reflection, allows for open viewing, but it does what I've been searching for in this, that they're both equally dominant, and they're talking with each other. It also does something I can rarely attain because I don't have the skill, which is an emotional impact for me. And it's no problem that I don't have the skill. I mean, Monet, at the end of his life, was bemoaning the fact that he didn't have the skill to render light at different times of day. And I've worked in my life with great, great poets, and I know what skill means. So what I call a lack is next steps, because one of the guidelines for tonight is, you're not allowed, I'm the boss here, to say anything bad about your own art or anyone else's. Next slide, please. This is Kaitlyn's. Woo woo! Kaitlyn is so wonderful. at encapsulating the things she most wants said. So this is primarily visual. It is a poster at which she excels, but you'll see later what came first, or she'll tell you. The butterfly came first, and as you search through Whitman and his body of work, and what kind of symbolic interface you want to have, she's nailed it. It's a totally different graphic medium because each of you will find you have a different level of skill. My husband does cartoons. He's magnificent. I tend to do these things that, big surprise, look like stained glass windows. So my hope is you'll start to get a nudge towards your own style, both graphically and writing tonight. Next slide, please. I'm going to ask Kaitlyn to just jump in about what this is. But before she does, this is what we want on a large scale. Interaction between the viewer, which, by the way, we're not going to worry about tonight. Emphatically, I stress that you work for yourself. Do not worry where it's going to go, who's going to like it, easier said than done. Do it for you so that you can find your own signature and voice. But eventually, this is what happens. This deep encounter between a live human being and a work of art. In this, there are words, but notice how they're hard to see. And Kaitlyn, would you just say a little bit why you chose this, please?
Yes, absolutely, Karen. So William Kendridge is a South African artist, and I've known about his work for a while. I didn't know for a long time that he also makes animations, but I think particularly this work really makes sense that it could also be an animation. But the way he uses text through this really brings you through this whole world that he's created in this archway here. The first word is develop over on the left. I also want to mention while we're looking at this, as people who read, we can't help but go from left to right, just naturally. And that absolutely is happening here. So then we have develop, the first word. Then towards the middle there, we have catch. And there's a lot of action going on around this, where it seems like someone's catching one of these hyenas almost in a backpack there. And then we have some more text, vicious, ornamental, and effective towards the right, and a very limited color palette as well. So we really just flow through it so quickly, but those words also give us a lot of direction. That's what I liked about this. And as Karen was saying, the physical element of standing in front of this and having it be like experiential, really powerful.
And before we leave this, I'd just like to point out the Western bias in this, because as you might have noticed from the deer, the Japanese read vertically and from left to right. So this is definitely a Western artist, and we know this because of the orientation. So in a world where, in my opinion, it's critical to be culturally sensitive, make conscious decisions about how you want to portray the world. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite writers of all time, Robert Mcfarlane, who's a British naturalist. And because he, like everybody I admire, realizes he can't do all of this alone, that he has to work in community, he always works with other people. And tonight, I would recommend for all of us to be in community. I would not be the writer or painter I am without other people. I'm a community artist. So Robert Mcfarlane, who could have his pick of anything, anywhere, picked Jackie Morris because he loved her art, and has a marvelous book about lost words, words we are losing because they're not frequent. And when you read the book the first time, you look at the dominant image, and he's obsessed with dandelions, as is Kaitlyn, by the way, you'll see. But notice as you look at this, how even if you try to read the decidedly light print, that was a decision. That wasn't just bad printing, that you keep returning to the image, and that was intentional. If you want to read the mythology of the dandelion, buy the book. Okay, next one, please. This is my mentor, who I can't say enough good things about. I located Barry Van Duzen, who is an international wildlife artist, because I saw a picture he had done in a book. I was a birder. I can't see, so I'm a pathetic birder. Nevertheless, I wanted to paint birds, and this was definitely the man who taught me. what Barry is the artist who did many field guides, but the most noble thing about him is that he takes his art all over the world and uses his art to make posters with a group of national wildlife artists, international artists, to raise money so that preserves can be bought and sold. So this is something that he did. They all gather together, these wonderful artists, and they do studies so that the wildlife is correct. So the only point of this study is to get the placement of the eye, the markings, and the direction. As a painting, though, because he started as a graphic designer, it is just a wonderful set of graphics that keeps your eye moving through the page. And my approach to learning this process really was from field journals. And I learned the painting process, at which I'm still a fledgling, from Barry. So there are many entry points if you want to pursue any of these ways of combining text and image. He's also has to get the science right and the facts right. And those are hard for me. Next image, please. I just love the image. I know that Blake didn't like this guy much because it's Duzen, and he was the god of material, rather of the visible world, of stuff. And what Blake cared about was the invisible world. I brought it up because I love the image. And I think his wife painted this. So he would engrave things and then his wife would paint because he didn't have time to do it all because his head was in the clouds and he was a mystic. But I would like to point out the triangle at the bottom as a perfect place to insert some texts. And the text we're going to be working with tonight is hold infinity in the palm of your hand. He never put this piece of poetry with this guy. That said, I welcome you to collage your life away and stick together disparate images for the point they make. Next slide, please. So before we go on to another 10 or 15 slides, pick an intention for tonight. If you don't like any of mine, pick your own. All we can do tonight is make a beginning. So the reason I do this is to discover, experiment, and connect with the world. I'm distracted as a person. My mind's all over the place. And it's to engage and connect and learn calms me, soothes me, and gets my mind off myself and onto something outside me. And it's just such a rest. I do need to create a beautiful page for other people and myself. I'll make that distinction in a minute. I will also say it took me about 5 years to know enough about composition and color and value and language and words to even begin to create a compelling page. And I had great teachers. I suggest you create it for yourself. Once we get other people into the mix, whether they're going to like it or not, whether it's a good painting or not, whether it's poetic or not, my experience is it leads us away from the joy of discovering and learning. So you can try it tonight for the next fun, delight, curiosity. I get it. I want to impress people with my insight and skill too. If you want to do that tonight, fine. Go for it. I did it for years. I still do it. And that's certainly a valid goal. However, my experience is that right off the bat, rarely do you get a successful, you might, image. So if you're working to show people how insightful, good, clever, whatever you are, good artist, it's kind of putting the cart before the horse in my experience. I absolutely recognize the importance of it and work with the Urban Sketchers, a magnificent group. And the Sketchers, some of us are playing around and yakking and eating and having community, and some people really want to be good, so I get it. I suggest you play with different ways of working. If you have a process as a poet or a writer or an artist, try something else. Or if you're very experienced and our work tonight is too rudimentary, try it anyway. Beginner's mind never killed anybody. So beginner's mind, approach it as if you knew nothing. My teachers have recommended this to me and it works well. Hopefully at the end of tonight, if you choose to pursue this art form, you'll have a plan. Your plan will be different from mine. I had to find a really good watercolor artist who had patients who would live with me for the 15 years. I mean, who would work with me. And Kaitlyn will probably discuss her process a little. So at this point, I'm just going to pause and ask you, because it's a good way to make a commitment. And if you don't want to keep it, no biggie. What would you like to get done tonight? Please pick something that's possible, a task focus. Just listen is fine. But what would you like to do tonight in this really precious time together? And Kaitlyn, who is, without whom there is nothing, by the way, is going to be looking at the chat. It's not a test. She's just going to give me a sense of when people have had a chance to write down what they want to do tonight.
One second. You know what? I don't think I can. Oh, wait, there it goes. Okay. Said it was buggy and it's proving itself to be. Okay, here we go. Let's see.
Caitlyn, why don't you read these? Because Alice is so marvelous and I learned so much from her. Can you read them, or is that too much back and forth?
I can now, yeah.
I don't mind if these are public. If anyone says, just put a big no if you don't want your intention shared. Privacy is really important.
All right, I'll tell you what we have so far. From Alice Hayden, Alice says, play with different techniques. Definitely going to do that. And Mary Phillips, hi Mary, it's good to have you. If you visit our YouTube, you also see her spoken word event that we had. And Mary says, to create beauty with an image, with image and words.
Well, you sure do it with words. This I know, Mary. Okay.
Ellen O'Connell says, I want to listen and watch and definitely have fun and delight in creative curiosity. Good to see you too, Ellen. Ellen's a regular at our events. Melissa, also another regular, good to see you, Melissa, says the thrill of writing poetry is discovery. My intention is to surprise myself. That's a good one too. Carol Ann Lawley says, I would like to listen and be inspired to create/begin a piece. Also perfect. At the beginning was my question from the get-go. That was always my, where do you start? And Maureen Spizak says, relax, enjoy, and discover something new. Again, perfectly. Maureen Weisberger says, fun and learning, experiment with art. These are a lot of the adjectives that we actually kept coming upon too, Karen, while we were planning this. So coming through clear.
Yay.
All right, and that's all we have for the moment. But if you want to add, take your time, think about it, you can always add it here.
So Ken, who's doing this with me, did you write yours?
No.
Okay. So I just want to mention something too. I believe it was Melissa. Melissa, I encourage you to use your own words rather than Blake's, since your goal has to do with creating poem. You're welcome to use the prompt, which is a William Blake quote, but I do, since you're already, and this is your goal, to surprise yourself, I encourage you to do this yourself. If you want to do it about an image or about the process of going through this, that's fine. And I'm just going to address Kaitlyn's comment because it's really important. There is no place to begin. Sorry, pick one. Sometimes I begin with an image. The George Floyd paint began with an image. Sometimes I begin with a principle. E.M. Forrester says, only connect. I don't care what I do as long as I connect. Sometimes I begin with a symbol. Sometimes I begin, since I'm trying to use direct watercolor, I begin with painting and a color. So where you begin is up to you. And in my experience, it varies every time. If you don't know where to begin, I suggest you follow what somebody suggests. And if you don't like it, no biggie. You learned you don't like that one. I would also begin with something that you know you can do passably well. So I always start with words because I'm good with words. Okay, next slide, please. So we're just going to do about 10 more minutes of it. So the most important thing, speaking of beginning, is Always think of art and text as design elements. They are not words. They are, but that'll be later in the program. What do I mean by a design element? So if you have a big white circle, or like in the Book of Hours, a big white square, everything is going to go to that, because a big white square plunked right in the center of something is going to keep pulling attention. If you have a lot of text, and I'll show you some examples of attempts Kaitlyn and I both made that, in our opinion, were not. The text is a block. Text as a block means it has density. So if you don't use a dark pen, or if you don't write, if you use a light pen and you spread it out, it won't be seen, even if you put a color on the background. If you use a dark pen, it'll dominate, because a dark pen, if you're using pencil, watercolor, or colored pencil, will always take over. Black always takes over. So we will show you examples of this, but think of the text as a big part of the shape and the design element. Next slide, please. Here's what I mean. See that big black crow ruining Basho's poem? I'm sorry, this is by Kyosa, and I'll show you what I feel is a successful image of the same poem later. But the good things about this are it does have different values. It has dark values, middle values. The crow is in fact pointing to the text. It's read from left to right. So, and you do stay in it. Also, the text is dark enough to read, and FYO, so for your information, so is the artist's seal. It was important to this artist, Kyosa, that his seal, which is the little red things, he wanted people to know who he was. Next slide, please. This is a 10-year-old painting that I copied. This is a John James Audubon picture of the ivory bill, because I'm passionate about species that are disappearing or extinct. And the prose around it is from the New York Times and my quest for many years about, well, how to save the ivory bill. And my husband and I took a trip to the South and we lived at the swamp. So this is just the upshot. I want to say something about copying. Go for it. Just credit people. So you'll see everywhere in all the art, if I'm going to take an image, copy an image, steal an image, or a piece of poetry, I always give credit. I never take credit for someone else's image or words. But this did do what I wanted. The problem with it graphically is when you divide a page in half, it's a little bit static as an art composition. Because of the ragged edges, this one is somewhat successful. There's also just too much print. Even God can't read all this print, and it's too small. Learn as you grow. Okay, next one. This is my dear friend, Dr. Jeff Levine, who was at the height of the COVID pandemic, all through it, working as a doctor. He is also a magnificent artist, and he kept a COVID journal. And though this is not his handwriting, we had to put it in to be readable. All through the pandemic, he drew sketches of himself on the subway, of himself going to work, of himself running away from home because it was just too much to take. And we don't do a lot of reportage tonight or journaling in order to know where you are and where you stand as a kind of lifelong learner. But the text is quoted in Jeff's article that was published in Artist Magazine, because it was so unusual for a physician to be doing such extraordinary art and language. Jeff has another wonderful quote, which I'll get you later if I get around to it. Next slide, please. This is deliberately a study about art. It's a salt marsh, and I was reading Kandinsky, who has a wonderful book called Art as a Spiritual Activity. I probably have the title wrong, it's written on the page. But I was interested in exploring what he said about art and doing a painting of a salt marsh. So that's what this is about. One of the successful things about this is that if it were a better slide, you would be able to read the print. It's big enough, it's dark enough, and the image is passable for what I wanted to do. But mostly I was writing about the art process. It's also Jamaica Bay in the background there, up on little squiggle on the horizon. So this is one of my favorite places to go and see birds. Next, please. Another artist. I see that my internet is unstable. Can you hear me, Kaitlyn?
You cut out for a second there, but you're
Okay.
totally good now there.
Excellent, thank you. So Hannah Hinkman has many books which are in the bibliography. It's about the process of doing this. She was studying clouds. She didn't care if the paintings were good. They usually are with Hannah Hinkman. She wanted to understand the nature of cloud formations and using line to communicate cloud motion. Next slide, please. Claire Walker Leslie has built her life around helping other people do what's called art journaling. Art journaling is very different than field sketching. Art journaling is for the pleasure of the artist. I love this. I love its simplicity, the use of art as a border. I like I like everything about this, and also it's a format in which most beginners can be really successful. Next one, please. Ah, my guy. For the poets in the group, you figure out what fearful symmetry means. And can he who made the lamb made thee in this time of COVID? This is an example of what I'm calling interweaving. It goes back and forth, back and forth. It's still not dark enough to read, and that has to do with the nature of the engraving process and the size of the print.
Karen, we lost you for a second here. I don't know if you can hear us. Coming back though, Karen. I can give it a second.
It's a broken page, but the design is set up so you can read the words as well as possible. Next slide, please.
And Karen, we lost you for a second, but I think we got most of it.
Good. Next slide. Whatever I said, I'll say it again. No, it'll show up if it's important. Another Claire Walker Leslie, for those of you who like to keep either daily journals or art journals, just a great image. The writing looks like clouds, which look like skies. And it floats. I like images that float on the page rather than those that are bound into a frame the way I need them because I'm that way. Next one. Kaitlyn, would you talk about you much more contemporary than, did you talk about this image and why at this point in the program?
Yes. So I chose these images because when Karen and I were actually talking about the image that she showed you earlier, her image, I started thinking a lot about protest art and how even just a protest sign is art always in its own way. It's people trying to draw attention to words. And I was trying to think of an artist who did this really well with imagery as well. So Molly Krabappel came to mind, and she's very much an activist. And these images, I think, are so powerful, the way that these portraits are framed with the words. You also can see the text is written in this really, like, it feels very fast and almost violent way. But the portraits are done with such care and love. So they sort of juxtapose each other and they make you want to look at them and know what they're saying. I was thinking this white line on the left side of each figure, she always does that. I think that's really important. It sort of brings you, it brings them forward, the two portraits there. And I was also thinking, these colors that she chose are not really what you would think of as alarming or bringing attention to something colors. Like you might pick red or you might pick orange, but she handles these so softly because there is that love for these two figures. She actually has a whole series, and she's printed posters like this before, and hung them up so you can, sort of engage with these figures. And I just think it's so important that we also touch upon that as well. And then also just the way the text sort of arches and works around these two figures, the composition really works. So yeah, at this point, it's also a good way of thinking of, you can focus just on a portrait like that, but still bring in your text and have it be equally important as the portrait, I would say.
I just want to add to this before you leave, Kaitlyn. The eye will go to the point of most contrast in the painting, which is that white line around the edge of the faces. And we could do a whole evening on the emotional impact of typography and lettering. But I love what you pointed out, the loving attention to detail on the figure. And then the very different oppositional quality in the words. When words float above people's heads, whether they're in cartoons or in any form, and you'll see a wonderful painting that Kaitlyn found later, they look as if it's what the person is thinking and feeling. So the placement of
Cut out for us here, Karen. I don't know if you can hear me.
I'm sorry, am I back?
You're back.
Good. And I'm going to go quickly as possible for the next few images so we stay on schedule.
Okay.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg, can't love her enough. The eyes point to the most important thing the day after she died. Next, please. This is a thumbnail, and this is going to be our first exercise, not this thing. This is me, because I love to write. The only thing I was trying to figure out was where to stick the text in the minus basin. The minus basin is that red-orange thing, and it really is that color. And that's all I wanted to figure out, is how to get the text readable. I'm working on a long series about Elizabeth Bishop, who was also a painter. So that's a thumbnail. And Kaitlyn, would you show yours, please? And Kaitlyn, these are Kaitlyn's thumbnails. So would you talk about how you use them?
Yes. So thumbnails are not like these complex times to be drawing where there's a lot of detail. It's actually just connecting with the things you want to put in your space, the things you want to fill the page, and how they will fill the page. So basically, I want this owl to be my main subject, but I also want the text to collaborate with this owl in a way where it's readable, it's interesting, it feels like you're acknowledging it, it's not sort of shoved in there. I'm finding a way where it feels like these are both important elements that I'm bringing together. So these took me very little time. What actually took the most time was figuring out what I wanted to draw. But once I had that, I took this owl, I drew him, as you can see, it's a circle for a face and just a few other little squiggly lines. And for my text, again, just squiggly lines for the text. But so in the first one, it's just the owl and some text. The second one on the top right here, the text is a little lower, a little text on top. The third one gets a little more complex because there's these boxes and these frames. I could do 10 on how to frame this owl. Sometimes it will run into his wings, sometimes it won't. And then the fourth one, that's the one I would consider the most successful and like interesting or activated really, is the circle there. It's almost like a moon behind him. And it really pays, while I was doing this, to, as we just did, look at a lot of art, because you'll just think of things that you wouldn't have thought of just, isolated on your own, and it takes some pressure off. You can start to see what's successful for other people and bring it into your own work, and it's still not actually copying it, it's just sort of taking pieces. So this will be what we'll have you do in just a moment. But again, no detail, just shapes.
I also want to point out something, and we can have the next slide, Kaitlyn. Kaitlyn said that was really important. I realize I shouldn't have talked when the next slide is up, but live with it. So sometimes all the time you spend is deciding, and if that happens to you, you're in good company. With the sketchers who sketch for a 3-hour block, for many of us, it takes us 1 hour and 3/4 to decide what we want to do. So this is part of this process. So if it happens to you, you're in good company. So here's the first exercise. You're going to do 3 thumbnails, more if you want, no more than 3 minutes. You're going to pick a design you like. You're going to choose the main focus or feature from your thumbnails. And this is to address Kaitlyn's, where do you start? I'll return to this in a minute. You're going to start with a word, an image, a painting, a drawing, a phrase. And then we're going to give you 7 minutes to do a mock-up. Now, the phrase we're recommending, just because it can be literal, is to see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. So if you want to draw a sand pebble and analyze the garnet in it, fine. If you want to draw a flower, fine. If you want to draw heaven, good luck, I'm still looking for it. If you want to draw the palm of your hand and take the quote literally, fine. If you don't want to draw at all, and you just want to start with words and you don't want to use Blake, fine. But what I suggest you do is decide where you're going to start. If you want to start with something that you thought about when we went through the slideshow, fine. So I'm going to give you a suggested starting point, and then all you need to come up with is 3 thumbnails and figure out where the text's going to go. You don't have to write it out. Usually you do just lines, the way Kaitlyn did in her really wonderful thing. But you might want to know what words you want, or if you want words to be dominant, stick those in first. So just to review, you can do a literal image prompted by the poem. You can do a piece of poetry or a line from this. I'm working on To See the World in a Grain of Sand. I've been working on it for about a month now. And what I want with that one phrase. So if you have questions, just put them in the chat. And Kaitlyn and I will be watching the chat and we will answer your questions. And we may keep up a running commentary, but there will be some silence because in my experience, some people can't draw and decide if somebody's yakking. So we will have a blend of this. Other people talk the whole time. Kaitlyn, what are you? Do you like to talk, have noise, or do you like to?
I have the TV on a lot of times.
Okay, so then probably we're going to go, so Maureen's not left stranded. Noreen's not left stranded with answering some questions. And my husband is really helping me out. Ken is doing the exercise to get a sense of time.
Thank you for that. My screen is all filled, so I can't even see the time here. Appreciate it.
We're at about 45 minutes, a little more, Kaitlyn, which is right where we wanted to be.
Good.
So Kaitlyn, do we have any questions in the chat while this is going on?
So we don't have questions, but we do have 2 more answers to our question about people's intentions for taking this workshop. So,
yeah, what are they?
Lauren Kashansky says, I look forward to and want to visit an old friend, poetry. It's been a long time since she has been at my table. Beautiful, Lauren. It's poetically written as well. Beautiful. And Melissa, who is a teacher, she's joined us, and you can tell by what she wrote here, says, fearful symmetry, the juxtaposition of one thing, perhaps the objective correlative if one is speaking of Eliot, that the thing represented can be equally terrifying and beautiful. Example, in the Iliad, Helen of Troy is called a terrible beauty. Oh, I love that.
This whole, that's absolutely marvelous, Alyssa. And much of this process is oppositional at its best. And T.S. Eliot famously said about, well, pretty much everything, as I'm sure you know, between the idea and the reality falls the shadow. And my experience with this process is trying to live not in the shadow, but to try and get some motion towards what I can see in my mind's eye, but can't yet render. I also would like, I'm sorry, I'm bad on names. Who just said that wonderful thing about want to visit poetry?
Lauren.
Yeah, Lauren. I suggest strongly that you write that down and make a work of art about that tonight. And a format that would suit very well, by the way, is the format we use with Dr. Levine, where the words, the kind of journaling words are on one side and the image of what that might look at another. That's such a gorgeous moment and experience. So go for it. Or
Yes, and I was thinking that when we were putting this all together, like if you have writer's block or art block, like this is a great place for ideas. You know, some of these you might be revisiting some of these works or they might be new to you, but I think it's a great way to sort of get your brain activated and wanting to do more.
And if anyone is stuck in indecision, I will give you an assignment knowing that it's a little dictatorial, but it might help you get started. In other words, I'll suggest something that you might, I'll suggest a starting point if people at this point are still in indecision. So just would you write in the chat? Kaitlyn, do people know how to write in the chat? Because I, for example, can't read the chat.
Oh yes, I hope they do. Up at the top, well, if you're on a computer, it's up at the top. You'll see there's a little box that you can click there. It will say chat. Then if you're on a phone, it'll be at the bottom there. I think it looks like a little chat box. I can't remember. It's been a little while, but it looks like a little blurb chat box from a cartoon or something.
Right, and on a Mac, it's at the bottom, the chat. So what you do is you double click and it will open up a panel.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone needs more help with that, I'm sorry, you're all muted.
All right. Oh, you know what? It's at the top for me because I'm the host and I'm screen sharing. I forgot. Yes, so it's usually at the bottom. You're right. A little different here. Oh, we have another chat.
That's Alice being her usual helpful self.
Good, good. Yes.
Thank you, Alice. You're just a joy and a delight. Thank you. So Alice just suggested to those of you, it's at the bottom.
Actually, you know what? I am going to go back to this for a second, just
Sure.
because I think it's important to remind everyone how simplistic these are.
Yeah.
No details here. Owl's beak is a V shape. And if you really get in a rhythm with doing this, I have to say that I personally, I don't stay in the stage very long unless I'm really planning something major, but it's so beneficial when you do. Because there's such endless possibilities of how you could lay out one page, you know, and it also gives you a game plan going forward. So it's important.
Now, if you're like the person I'm working with, you may have already done your thumbnails. And if that's true, take a piece of Xerox paper, and then pick one and write in actual words, or pick one and just do a mock-up. A mock-up is, depending on what paper you're using, an 8.5 Xerox paper. But at this stage, you need to pick one and then make it large. And my experience with this is what I call the return. That means I always return to what my intention is and my goal, and I get derailed, I don't know, 20 to 30 times a minute. So I just keep returning to what I'm trying to do, whether it's art or an idea. And if, for example, I don't like the one I picked, I work with it or I start again. Just keep yourself in your job. And the hardest thing to do is to let go. So it's your decision whether you start again or just work with something that's not working. No, you can fix it. Some people find success right away. That's my wish for you. Ken, where are you in the process? Great. Could you pick one and do a full-size page?
Yes.
Great. That'll help out with our timing. Thank you, dear.
I'll also mention too, if you do this frequently, you'll sort of develop your own shorthand. So like I had to like think about how to make that look more like an owl just to be showing it. But it's really a shorthand. It's a shapes, shapes, shapes. They might even be a line to symbolize something. And it's all about just that layout. That's all you really want there is, you know, how many sharp edges are there? How many circular sort of motions are, so working through it that way. And you almost develop a language with yourself of what is what. Like a flower is a circle, and that's it.
And just because time is an important part of the exploratory process, you have about 3 or 4 minutes left. And you can decide whether you're going to just keep going step by step, which is what I do, by the way. I never try to finish something in someone else's time frame. It makes me crazy. But some people like to force themselves knowing that they have 3 to 4 minutes, because you'll be surprised at the intuitive results you get if you want to get something done.
And then Karen, we actually have 2 comments in the chat. I'm just gonna,
Yes.
So Alice says, okay, I did 3, but had to add a tad of color, which will be our next step. So you're in good place there, Alice. And Melissa says, what is the significance of 3? Is there one? You want to take that, Karen? Your thoughts on that?
Oh, no, we were trying to just figure out. Wonderful. Hang on just a second. I was looking at the sketch across the dining room table. There's no significance of the 3. People draw 7. This was just to, there's no significance at all. Some people nail it right on the first one. Many of the artists I know who, and I'm mostly a writer, so keep that in mind, do 4 or 5, but there's no significance. We were just trying to give you all an opportunity to get something done. Alice, to your question about color, this was one of the most painful decisions that Kaitlyn and I made, which was not to focus on color tonight. You are a wonderful artist. So in the next exercise, I encourage you to use color. The reason we chose not to do this was because color is a whole pilgrimage. And what we chose to do was color gets all the credit and value does all the work. So unless watercolorists have the ability to create really dense darks and can see the difference between dark middle tones and lights and white space, we found that color was frustrating. That said, we have 3, to my knowledge, really good artists here. So in the next exercise, we are going to be focusing on color and on value and how commanding in the designing of a page, value and color can be. That looks like a hair.
You know, I'm trying to figure out how to get rid of it.
There it is. There's hair everywhere.
Yeah, it's coming and going. I'm not sure.
So we're gonna, everything I own has hair and breadcrumbs and coffee stains.
Right.
Kaitlyn, you might maybe is there an undo button?
Well, it's not, I'm not doing it like, do you know what I mean?
Oh,
It's coming
it's
from another computer, I think.
Wow.
that's bizarre.
I know, I've never seen it. I wonder if I can do something on Zoom. It's almost like something is making it happen. Hold on. Oh, there, I think someone has the annotate button, maybe.
Oh,
Actually, that might be what it is.
Is that you? I'm sorry, I'm digitally impaired, guys. I'm useless.
Okay, disable annotation. That might be.
Yeah. But you also have an eraser.
Oh, in
Yeah.
PowerPoint? All right, let me see if I can get that going for us. All right, exit the slideshow. Oh, it won't let me.
It should be on, like, when my students do things like this, it's definitely, yeah, it's not you. So I say to them, like, guys, come on, just erase it. And but I don't know if anyone is aware of who it is that's doing it. Yeah.
Right.
I'm gonna, Melissa, thank you so much. I'm gonna move on because I think we have few enough people that we're gonna do much better show at the end. But right now, if people would just in gallery view, hold up, if you choose, anything that you just did. And Ken, would you hold up yours? I'm gonna take my husband's.
All right, and then what I can do is
We will find a way for these to be shown better, but because it's very hard to see on the small Zoom thing. But after we go through the whole presentation, we will certainly find a way to feature you so you can show your work in a way that it shows up better. So this is the end result. And here are the three, I know it's a little bit hard to see, 3 thumbnails. And anyone else? How are we doing, everyone?
Karen, I traced my right hand, period.
Yay, Maureen.
Noreen with an N.
Noreen, sorry, Noreen, I'm sorry. I'm reading an M word because I wrote down Melissa's name, so I'm sorry to confuse you, Noreen. I know you, dear, and it's a great idea to do your hand. Nice, Carol Ann. Let me just look at the rest of these.
Yeah, I have a bouquet of flowers,
Uh-huh.
and the picture that it's in is striped, and I thought, well, that would be a cool thing to put words in, you know, to
What
put
a
words
cool
in
idea.
the cards are.
What a great
So-
idea.
Thanks.
Yes, Alice. Alice, tell us a little about, no, you're on mute. Alice, unmute yourself, dear. Let's hear a little about this process.
Okay, well, you said write your own poetry.
Right.
So I kind of, I don't know, picked up on the dandelion thing, although I think mine are more like Queen Anne's lace. And I said, love freed plants itself where needs be. And so I guess I started by drawing one, and then the words were along the stem over here. And
Wow.
then I liked the idea of the moon, so I did a moon, and of course, notice I have touches of color because I watercolor, and color is seducing. And then the last one I did is the bigger one, and again, it's all on the stalks, except that where it needs be is kind of like typography dripping down into where it's planting itself to the ground to grow.
This is great. So we're going to stop the share. And for those of you who didn't get to, forgive us because we will have time at the end. But we want to give people some more options. So we're going to continue now. And mostly Kaitlyn's going to be talking about this, but our next section is balancing color, value, and text. So if you're swirling with options and questions, you're in the right place. So Kaitlyn, go for it, dear.
all right. I'm unmuted, right? Yes. Okay. Good.
Yeah, you're good.
All right. So we're going to start out with these gorgeous posters by Wes Wilson. They're from the 1960s, and I'm sure you can kind of tell everyone has sort of an idea of the psychedelic 60s. This really embodies it. It comes a lot from his work, actually. And it's also inspired by Art Nouveau, another major art movement. And I think that these are tremendously successful as images, and the text does such a great job of flowing throughout. We're getting all these shapes. But I will say, I wonder if they really work as posters, which is what they're meant to be. So this would be hung somewhere to make you want to come to a concert. And I'm sure, he was majorly famous. I'm sure people were loving seeing these. They knew exactly what they were at some point. They knew they were for a concert. If you go in there, you can find the date, the admission price, everything's actually in there. But I don't think it registers right away. You need to give yourself some time with it. And it's absolutely a beautiful way of working for sure, sort of a lava lamp effect going on. But if the text was really important to him and was the primary thing, this would not be the way to go. So that's just an interesting way of thinking about like the balance there. But luckily, yes, because he achieved so much renowned fame, people knew, oh, it's one of his posters. I'm going to go read it actually and get the information that I want from it. So I'm going to go to the next slide here. Where would we be without Whitman? So we had to get some Whitman in here too, other than just the poster at the beginning. And we have Paul Pike here. His work is amazing. He's a printmaker, or was a printmaker, and he actually would carve a wood block to get everything you're seeing here. So it'd be one block, and he would then put color on each part, individually color them with a roller. And he could make many, many, many of these prints, like you see here, which is an interesting way of working. So he really had to plan ahead of time where everything would be and be sort of aware of that before he even started carving. It's a very strenuous thing to do. So as you can see, the text here is, you want to read it because it's almost a little difficult to read, I find. So it's inviting in a strange way, the image, and then you want to know what this text says, really. It's sort of his own fun handwriting that he's made here. And the power of the negative space comes up a lot too. So if he had a colored background here, it would be impossible to read. It wouldn't be as inviting. You wouldn't see these figures as well. The one all the way here on the right actually has more of a colored background, but he very intelligently broke it up. So the text has its own space that goes around Whitman's hat. And then the image has its own space down there at the bottom. And you can imagine he could do 20 thumbnails for this, any one of these, and sort of continue planning the process. I'm sure he did do a lot of that. Then we have William Kendridge again. I thought this was a great example of found text. So that text in the background is from a book. Obviously, he's just taking a book. I don't think he cares what it says. I don't think it has any relation to what he's putting on top of it, actually. But he's using that found text as, again, a value, right? If we squint our eyes, we forget that that's text, and it's actually just a design in the background there. So it's kind of an interesting play with text. You know, we know this is a book. It's sort of a found object that way. The other thing I think is really successful, especially if you're very familiar with his whole body of work, is the way he uses color. You're almost hungry for color when you're looking at these, and he's just giving you like a little tiny bit. He often works with the same colors, this red, these blues, and they're shocking almost because everything is, you know, black and white for the most part. So it really, again, just draws you in. It makes you want to keep looking. And then the text that he puts on top of text, it's because the found text in the background is light. And then say in the bottom right there, that panic and picnic is a vibrant red grabbing you in the forefront there. So that's another thing to think about, is background and forefront. What's closer to us, what's further from us, and what text doesn't matter in this example. Doesn't get read even necessarily. All right, Karen, I'm gonna go back to you for this one.
So Tom Thorsbecken is a wonderful teacher and very generous artist, and he's interested in performance. The only reason I picked this, other than I just love Tom, and I've studied with him, is the City Beautiful is a perfect place to put text. And he's arranged the whole, the other thing he does, Kaitlyn had mentioned planning. In this work, you really do need to, most of the time, have a plan for where the print is going to go, where the colors are going to go, and do a value sketch, which we're going to talk about at the end. But this is a really good example of, he goes to the place and he draws the background first because he knows it takes time. And then when the museum,
You cut out for us there, Karen. Can you give it another second? I'm not sure if you can hear me.
back.
You're back, yes.
Okay, good. I'm back. Nothing I said will be missed. Continue.
Okay. This one for you too as well, Karen.
Right. I'm only here we go. This is again my dear Barry Van Duzen, who was hired to do a work for Mass Audubon about the sanctuaries. Now he is a bird artist, and Barry is a big believer in the beautiful page. I will tell you that this was done without the print, but then it had to be put into a book. And he has chosen to focus on what he most cares about this particular preserve. And it's the birds. And Barry is also obsessed. I'd like everybody to just focus briefly on the black and white drawing at the top. When you're doing plants, being scientifically accurate or critical, how many leaves, how many petals. This I will never accomplish in a lifetime, but for those of you who are exact, he does a lot of work to do this. I'm not going to read the text because we're going to do some text work toward the end. I will say that he's a magnificent writer. Why is he magnificent? Because he writes like a poet teacher. He writes short sentences that are cogent, and though they're written in prose, they give you not just information, but they point to interconnections between this place, the creatures, the animals, and he's also a wonderful artist. Continue. Kaitlyn, it's yours, dear.
Oh, yes. This is a work by Jean-Michel Basquiat. He was a street artist and a painter during the 1980s. He's an amazing painter. He used a stream of consciousness. So like earlier I was saying, I kind of listen to TV sometimes while I'm doing my work. He would have 3 or 4 TVs in his studio playing just so he could get these words. And what he would do is, I very much doubt he did any planning. He might have maybe thought about what this sort of devil horned person in the middle here would look like. He might have thought about that. But as for everything else, it's very of the moment, stream of consciousness. So you see these areas where he blacked things out. I bet you there were things he just didn't like there and he just went right over them. So he's sort of juggling everything at the same time. And what's so successful about this as well is that light blue in the background. So he could have left it white and it all would have been readable, but he chose a light blue. So these words are still popping out at us, but it's a light color. So it's not competing with these words too much. It's competing a little bit, and I think that's very intentional as well. And the other great thing about this is you go everywhere, right? Once you really invest a moment in this painting, and I should also mention it's huge, so it's going to overpower a room. You know, it's the one painting for a room most likely. You would really just keep reading. You go everywhere. I'd say in a circle. I go in a circle when I look at it, and I would just want to take in more and more information. There's these other little characters throughout, and I think it just best describes like what a human consciousness is in a way. That's really the goal here. It's words and images all over the place, really, like this is. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, now this is one, I call this an attempt. This is from back when I was in art school. I was very into Basquiat, who I was just talking about, and I wanted to sort of play with his style and learn from his work. So like Karen was saying earlier, it's great to copy. I use my own subject matter. I did a self-portrait. Basquiat also did a lot of self-portraits, and I just played basically. And what I found with this painting is it didn't work successfully because I also have a light blue in the background. I really pulled from his inspiration, but the light blue is solid. And I just find that I don't go all around the page. I want to know the portrait first, kind of. I want to kind of know what these words are. I don't think that the actual hand lettering is strong enough to like really keep you engaged. I should also mention it's a larger painting too, like life size, I would say. So I just find this to not be as successful as that. I think there's also too much information on the portrait too. So what I would do, let's say if I really was excited and I wanted this to really be a painting, I'd start over and I'd learn from all of this right here and go again. And sometimes that's the best way really to keep going forward and learn a new style. You know, this isn't how I work now, but had I not made this, I don't think I would work the way I do now. So it's good to just keep diving in like that, like you're doing tonight, learning about other ways of thinking and working. All right, and this one lives in my parents' basement. I think it always will. I had to dig it up for this. All right, Karen.
Shout out to your parents being here in your parents' basement. This is my attempt. This is the kind word we decided upon. Talk about too much information. This is a very, very early sketch of mine. And I was trying to do too many things. It is a poem by William Cullen Bryant, to whom I owe a great debt of gratitude, because William Cullen Bryant has given more land, more money, more funds, more care to art than almost anyone of his generation. He has preserved a native forest, of which this is a picture. And his work as a poet, unfortunately, fell out of style because he got stuck in the rhyming couplet curse of the time period in which he was. Really extraordinary poem called Thanatopsis. What I do love about this is if you go to the Bryant Preserve in Cummington, Massachusetts, and I do a lot of travel sketching, the Bryant Preserve has been saved by Bryant as a native forest. So what works about this is the mossy rocks and the things that only happen with actually a fairly accurate kind of hemlock up in the upper left. That's successful. As a painting, I just didn't know enough to do a wash. And there's much too much print. And so that you just don't know where to look, and it's muddy and murky. But as with what Kaitlyn said, I learned much from this about my next. What I learned from this is less information. I had help with the composition. My watercolor teacher, Barry, helped me with this because I couldn't even figure out where to stick the words. I learned a lot about value and how the front rocks and all of the moss and all, they really need darker darks. And I won't go on, but this was one of my first attempts at blending words and visual and art and an idea. So I have a lot of tenderness for it, even though it too is in my parents' basement, so to speak. So we're going to go, I think, to the next exercise, right, Kaitlyn?
I think so. And I just want to
Or do
really
we have a few more?
we had a tour of William Cullen Bryant's estate, Cedarmere, which is here on Long Island. And that's also on our YouTube channel if you want to check that out. It was really beautiful. The property, the Nassau Museum of Art is also in that tour, the outdoor sculptures. So definitely check that out. It was a beautiful event. Okay, Karen, back to you.
This is what if you're not an artist but a writer. This is learn value. And
Karen, can you hear us? You're cutting out a little bit. I can see you moving.
am I back?
Now you're back. Oh, maybe not. Let's just give it a second, Karen, because I do want to hear you. Well, I can tell you something I know about this slide while we're waiting. So the image on the left, Karen had found online, and she copied it here on the right, that sketch there. So you can actually see like where she got her inspiration from, and then how she brought the text into it. Oh, Karen, you're back. There we go.
Kaitlyn said it better than me. Do whatever you need to help. Next one.
Okay.
We planned on this happening.
Yeah.
What's the next image here?
We have the value sketches here. So we're going into our exercise very soon.
Yeah, so let's get into that. This is Suzala Zoller, an incredible artist who taught a great workshop. And this addresses Alice's question about color. We did two thumbnails, we did paint swatches, and then we copied a photograph in order to plan where we would put the darks in the painting. I picked the first thumbnail, and where I'm going to put the print when I get it in there is in the sky and in the white reflective part of the water. That's kind of all you need to know, but a Notan is a wonderful tool. If you look up Notan online, it's a Japanese art form that started with manga, and it will show you how to see black and white, where to put your darks, when you're going to mess up, go for it. But Suzala taught a terrific workshop in values and how to render them on a page. So that's all you need to get out of this one.
Well, I want to add just one more thing that helped me so much in art school to understand value. and this shows it very well. So value is like if you just took a painting and you put it on a copy machine and made it black and white, just like up top here, that's what value is. It's like how dark, how light, and you need to like kind of learn to do that in your mind with color. And it comes from just doing it again and again, sort of. Because color can be deceiving, you know, it isn't black and white. It's this is darker, this is lighter. It's not always that apparent. So especially if you're using something like neons, trust me.
And do notice there was a black hole of Calcutta in the thumbnail. This is where I always mess up, try to put the text, and that's what we don't want. Okay, so our next exercise is, we did not talk about eye flow. We'll talk about that later. It's how the eye moves through the page. So I'm gonna, for example, the eye moves through this slide by reading exercise 2, kind of, sort of, and we read from right to left. But in a painting, you have to control, as the artist or the poet or the writer, the eye flow, which is what the eye goes to first and why. And if you wanted to go to a word, you have to do different things than if you wanted to go to a value. So here's the next exercise, and I'll talk more about eye flow because we have better examples in the last set of slides.
Mhm.
You're going to redraw or start a new page of what you did last time. Then you're going to pick 2 things to focus on: white space, value, eye flow, and text. I encourage the writers to start with text this time and figure out where you're going to put it, how much you're going to write. You might even want to write it out in pencil or in pen, and then let the art evolve from there, because we have 3 poets who are really quite elegant writers. Simplify the elements to clarify what you want to say. And we're not going to get into the specifics of foreground and detail, background, blurred, and abstract. I will discuss those at the end. I suggest you try to do less rather than more, and then start to do a sketch with pen, pencil, or color. So draw your mock-up or your plan of whatever topic you want to do. You can stay with the one in the first exercise. You can start a new one that you've been thinking about. Most people here are pretty advanced. You already have a process for art or writing. And we will give you 10 minutes. We're just a little bit over, Kaitlyn. We're about 5 minutes over, so we're pretty good here on our time. And we will continue to just comment for the next 10 minutes as people are doing this. So the focus of this exercise is not to try to do everything, but to try to choose the 2 things or 3 things that you really want to work on in this exercise. So I recommend, I think it was Melissa, work on fearful symmetry, since that was the phrase that sung out to you. But this is really your call. Just don't, I encourage you not to try to do everything. Pick 2 things that you want to focus on and play with them. Okie dokie.
I just
I'm
want
gonna
to throw in the simpler the better. So if you have like a whole landscape, maybe pick a tree. Simpler the better.
Or Noreen, stay with your hand and put writing in it or around it.
Mhm.
Such a great idea.
Mhm.
And I have the benefit of having an artist across the table, so I'm just gonna ask him what he selected and what he's working on, just to give you a sense of somebody completely different from me. What are you doing there, different? He's working on his own project, something different. As this goes, no, it's great. This is exactly what we want. So he's doing this complicated, I suspect it's going to be a greeting card, vase of flowers. He makes greeting cards.
Oh, very nice.
No,
Very
you'll
inspired.
see some of his work at the end. How are people doing in the chat there, Kaitlyn? Anyone good?
Check up on that. Let's see. Come on. There it goes. We had a comment from Alice earlier about the values discussion we were having about seeing dark to light to medium tones. And Alice says, from quilting, look through a red cellophane to see value. That's a great way of doing it. Absolutely.
Absolutely, and you can get them at Blick or other places. It's a wonderful way. It took me years to see value, which is what's dark, what's in the middle. I can now see about 10 to 15 gradations of value. I cannot yet render them in watercolor. I can do them in pencil and in black and white. But if you can't see it at all, which by the way, I couldn't.
Kind of tough too.
I recommend you get red cellophane. It's a wonderful way. It will do it for you. And I'm just going to mention to the writers that the way we establish eye flow, just to give you a little things you probably have, is by things like line breaks, space between lines, what we choose to pack together, the kerning or the space between letters when we type or do the writing we do, the use of punctuation. All of these things are actually graphic elements that enhance the potency of the word. And even in selecting the presentation, Kaitlyn and I, for the lesson instructions, chose the most readable font so that you could glance at it if you forgot. Pretty, not especially, but often legibility is more important than art and beauty, but not always.
Right.
I will tell you, nobody can ever read what I write, and I've almost ceased to care unless it's going to be used commercially, because I'm writing in order to know what I think and feel, rather than writing to say something profound about the drawing I made. But all of these balancing acts that go on are part of the real excitement of this process. So thanks, Alice. That's a great suggestion. Kaitlyn, anything else? You should be, by the way, we're about halfway through our second exercise.
I wanted to add too, to pick up on what you were saying, Karen, about eye flow. A great example being the crow's beak that pointed at the haiku poetry. You can have things that are literally arrows almost to point to important information in an image. Be it
Yes,
text.
and when I did Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I directed her gaze, her glasses toward the only thing I cared about, which is the impact she had on the lives of people. It happened to be the Jewish ceremony day when they passed bread upon the waters, and I thought that it was just so amazing that that was the weekend she died and that she got her work done. But what I wanted people to look at was words that she said that were important to her that are dead center, which is usually an artist rule you don't do. So you can establish directionals in a lot of different ways.
Or when we look at the Basquiat, they call it an all over composition. That's certainly what it is, with all the text everywhere. That's a way of almost not having a direction at all, but still being able to entice people to look at it because it's almost so complex and not telling you what to do right away.
But the Basquiat is the way my mind works and the way my living room table looks.
Same here, same here.
For that reason, it's marvelous to be able to encapsulate the inner world so gorgeously. I tend to live in the inner world. I like Pigpen. I like the space and the story going on in my own body and mind more than the dust that's going around outside. And Basquiat really does render that really well.
Really.
So we're gonna wrap up in about 2 minutes or so, or 3 minutes. And yeah, I think we should do another share. What do you think, Kaitlyn?
Yeah, I think our time's
Yeah, we're good. Because I know that the last part only takes about 20 minutes to go through, and then the last exercise will be longer, by the way. because you get to pull all of this together. I should have said pace yourself at the beginning. Sorry, guys and women.
Oh, we actually have a question in the chat.
Yes.
And Carol Ann asks, how do you feel about the app that fits words into forms? I forget what it's called. Words into forms.
Caitlyn,
do
you
mean
take
shapes?
that because I have a feeling
Word
about it.
forms? Say it again, Carolyn.
Caitlyn, you
It's an application where you put in words and the words get fitted into like a shape.
Okay. Kind of like those posters we looked at earlier.
It's
Kind
concrete,
of like,
concrete
um,
poetry.
let's say you had the shape of a bird, and then you'd have like all kinds of words that had to do with the bird in that shape.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the
You know what I
word for it.
mean?
But yeah, it's really nice. And like the most important
cool.
word is bigger, and then the other,
Yeah.
yeah. I've seen those so frequently and they're amazing. It's really,
And I can't think of the name of it.
it's like a snap composition of words. Yeah. Yeah. And that was another thing Karen and I were talking about. Is like, there's so much you can do digitally now. That's amazing.
Right.
But
Right.
it still comes back to knowing what looks good, which sounds so simple, but
Yeah.
knowing how people will look at things too, like how someone will read something, that's so important. So even if you're a graphic designer, it's so important to know how to make a page look strong and interesting and inviting to people.
You know, it's funny. I took a class many years ago with an artist. It was a graphic artist class, and I just always remember him saying to us, "I want you to do at least 4 thumbnails before just because you're sitting at the computer doesn't mean that you should be wasting time on the computer." So he used the thumbnails to really hone in on what the idea was and to not waste time. So we weren't really allowed to create on the computer unless we had 4 sketches. And
That's
I thought
really
that was like really important.
Yeah, it's really smart. And I find sometimes I make images for our events and things, I sometimes feel so disconnected from them that it is good to just sort of jot down the main idea of what you want to get out. Like sometimes it's sort of, you're looking at it so distantly instead of on a page to yourself. So I think that's great advice. I don't think it gets given enough, that kind of
No, you're exactly right. Because I think especially now, we just expect to like sit at the computer and create.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just throw it on there.
Right.
Without the background thinking.
And also physically making something is different. I mean, they both have a lot of pros and cons, but yes, you're a very like a physical person. It's important to embrace that, even if you're doing graphic design.
Caitlyn, I'm going to interrupt because I've changed my mind. In order to give people more time to work at the end, I think we should just continue. We have such resources in the room that I would like to use them at the end. So how about if people, if you didn't get to show what you did, you will get a chance at the end of the last section, but the last section does address some of the things that came up. And I will return to the app and the digital and iPad create and computer and speed at the end, because it's a different way of being in time and it's a different way of connecting. But right now, I feel we should continue just so people get the benefit of a few more aspects of this process. So why don't we go to the next and last section? So start, girlfriend. Here you go.
Okay. So this is a mock-up.
Everybody, this is about multiple ways to use this art form, from murals to postcards to art journals to anything. So this is the potpourri section of you go for it.
Okay.
Kaitlyn's process in this mural is really astonishing, and do mention the special thanks issue at the end.
Okay, yes. So this is a sketch actually for a mural that I've been working on now for 2.5 or so weeks. But it's with Patchogue Arts Council. They are amazing. If you're here on Long Island, they do so much work for artists and so much to get exposure for artists. I've worked with them many times. So this was an opportunity I had to apply for, and it's for a physical wall to be painting a mural on it. And I called the wall my white whale because I wanted that mural so badly for so long. So this is my mock-up, and I knew the dimensions of the wall. You'll see there's some physicalities to the wall. There's actually a garage door and like a regular door that you can walk through that needed to be considered. And the meaning behind this work, the theme that they asked for is coming of age, because it's 2021. So like at 21, you drink, you're an adult. There's a lot of things with 21. So the way I thought about this was, for example, dandelions go through a life cycle. It's very visual. We can see it happening all around us all the time. They close up at night, and then eventually they become these puffs of seeds towards the end of their life cycle. And they're just something very common that we just don't even acknowledge. So I love bringing them to a big scale. Like, no, I'm going to go to the next slide just so you can see physically how it's going. So the dandelions were a big part of it, and then also cicadas. If you're not familiar with cicadas, they're these insects that are about this big. They come out every 17 years for the most part. There's multiple broods of cicadas, so they all have slightly different patterns they adhere to. But this year we were supposed to get brood X. They're orange, they're really cool looking. I was very excited to see them. However, after I got this mural and I was excited to do it and I was planning it, we found out that the brood X is basically extinct on Long Island now. They did not come up when they were expected to come up. So basically, I thought I was celebrating something we'd be seeing. Instead, I was kind of making note of something that's going extinct. But so that life cycle, again, is always going on underground. And so this is my layout of how I actually, once I got to the physical wall, I changed a lot of things. So I'm just going to go back quickly. So there's a whole new cicada. That's an important part, right towards the middle there. There's no cicada in this one. The other part is that garage door is, you can't ignore that. You have to really plan around that. So I had to like physically sort of encounter every part of this, look at it from multiple angles, and figure out how it would best be approached. So I'm not done finished with it yet. This is in progress. The left side here, you can see there's not much fleshed out on the left yet at that point. Then this is how I left it a few days ago when I was finished painting at night. The right lower image there. There's a lot of details that have to come in. But while I was working on this, and we were working on our workshop together, Karen and I was told that I need to incorporate text into this mural, the theme being one thing, and also a bunch of thank yous, which I am happy to do. I just had no idea I had to do it. So I'll show you in the next slide. And this is not finished, so, but you can see it says coming of age there. I mean, I think it's going to work because there'll be more flowers coming in. There'll be more of those dandelion puffs. And some of those puffs are going to be floating near it. And if I was critiquing myself, I'd say, oh, it looks like this was kind of thrown in at the end. And it is a little bit thrown in. It would be much more incorporated had I known, but it's already at this stage when I found out. But I think it's a good example of a work in progress. Like, so reacting to things, not liking things. The other part of it is, actually, wait, I have a better image of the whole thing. There we go. The other part of it is we're talking about directing your eye. Certainly these leaves do that. They're sort of bouncing you to different parts of the wall. They're almost arrows pointing to different parts. The cicada, this was very intentional. The cicada is leaving us to the top right there. He's on his way out. And that really brings us out of the actual mural. So that motion upward is a good ending to the end of the mural there. It's important. Had he been, say, going straight up and down, it would be a whole different feeling, if you can imagine that. If he was just sort of, he'd also be more of a symbol rather than an active cicada flying, if that makes sense. And then also the buds there on the left side, they're bouncing you back into the image the way they're pointing. Again, just they're almost arrows. That's how I think of a lot of these, the subject matter. And then lastly, the dandelions too, on the right side, they're facing different directions. That's intentional also to, again, keep your eye flowing through this thing. I think it's very important. And there will be those little dandelion seeds flying around. Those will also just sort of bounce your eyes all over the place. You'll follow them almost when it's done. But yes, this has been going on for a while. It's very physical. You can see my scaffolding there. I'm always up and down there, moving the scaffolding. I have some great helpers. But yeah, this is what I love to do. So I'm very excited to be doing it and sharing it with you in progress. All right, let's go to our next slide. I don't want to take too much time.
Oh, I'm just excited that your parents are getting to see this. And I love that you have to include all these thanks painted on the wall and you didn't know that. So this is just I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. Text is a visual clue. So here are some of the ways you use print in a poem to create motion and also enhance meaning. Line breaks. Line breaks help you pause for reflection at the end of a line. They allow for you to make associations to the line you just read. They give you negative space to think. And also a line break with or without punctuation will indicate whether you're supposed to move on or linger. Punctuation, the best example of this is Emily Dickinson. So I'm going to ask Kaitlyn to go to the next slide. So Emily Dickinson, in her poem about the gentian, a gentian, for those of you who may not know it, is a fringed flower that blooms last. It blooms in winter. And here's what she's doing in order to make the text, or using text in order to instruct you how to read and what to focus on. She loved dashes. There are books and volumes about what the dash does. Decide what it does for you. It's also a great way to fill up a line if you made a mistake when you wrote the text and you've got it in dark pen on your painting. The line break after snows tells you to move on into the next verse. This is a poem about a gentian wanting to be something other than what it was, bloom when it wasn't intended, and that the creator and God had this idea for my art style my whole life. It didn't work. So another thing, capital letters. Many people feel it was whimsical. Personally, I do not. I think she uses capitals, as you may want to do in your own work, in order to call attention to sound, God, gentian, the sound of the literal letters in this alphabet imitates the sound of frustration and gagging until finally the last line, creator, shall I bloom, long sounds, long vowels. There's not an example of semicolons and periods as stopping devices, but when you're working in this medium, I strongly suggest that you think of punctuation. Please.
Oh, you cut out, Karen. Next slide. Is that
Yes, please.
okay?
We've talked about this. Text has shape when you write it a poem. It can be orderly, it can be geometrical, it can be ragged, it can point directions, or it can, as somebody mentioned with the bird app, it can mimic, as did the poet E.E. Cummings, exactly what you're talking about. He has a wonderful poem about a balloon man. And the text looks exactly like an old clown holding a balloon. Enough said on that. Let's continue, please, to the next slide. This is Elizabeth Bishop, who made the right-hand edge of the poem look like the tide looks when a sanderling, which is a bird that walks along the water's edge, looks like. She was very deliberate about her punctuation. She wants you to pause after the granted line,
I just put the other image, which is from a field journal of somebody studying sanderlings and what they do, by an author whose name Valentine. And I put them next to each other to show two different explorations of being with this skittish, marvelous bird. The reason I picked this poem, other than I adore Elizabeth Bishop and her craftsmanship, I'll tell you a story about her in a minute, is poor bird, he is obsessed. It's the third line. I feel that I just love the line about creatures obsessed, artists obsessed, and everything else. Oh, just an anecdote that is really worth it for the poets. Elizabeth Bishop would hang up different lines of the poem she were writing in a clothesline across her kitchen. And then she would wait for a line that she couldn't get, and she put a blank piece of paper there. And when she was dying or about to die, her good friend Robertson Jeffers said to her, do you still hang your poems up? Sometimes it would take her 8 years for a certain line in the poem to arrive. She had such patience. And when the line arrived, she'd like hang it up in the kitchen. So I just like the use of time in order to find the right language, which she did. Next slide, please. We're going to talk finally about the word as symbol, the American flag as a symbol. Do you stick it in because it means different things to different people? A symbol as an organizer. In art, it is called a signifier. And the last set of drawings about using words as symbols, as things that point to inner and outer meaning. The problem with symbols has always been they mean different things to different people. And a symbol is so powerful that it will anchor and immediately put someone into a certain frame of mind. Next slide, please. Talk, Kaitlyn.
Okay.
Example.
I got this one. So this is a mural that I did at NECA Art House, which is in Patchogue. And so I had this odd space to work with. Obviously, there's a shelf up there. So I wanted it to be very graphic. Also, the work they show there is very graphic. And I've done a lot of work with hummingbirds. So this is an astronaut suit with a sort of self-sustaining hummingbird with flowers inside. And so I started working this out. I had a very rough sketch of it. I wasn't sure what would happen in the background. I had to sort of wait to see if those stars and things made sense back there, or if they cluttered up the whole area. So that was a lot of balancing act. But we're using this one especially because of that American flag that's here in the foreground on the arm. To me, it was a huge decision whether I should say this is an American astronaut and here's this, and is that going to take away from everything else and make you think too long about, you know, reality in a way, because this isn't a very realistic concept even. But in the end, I decided it does take you to reality, but kind of in an interesting way. I intentionally made the flag not perfectly straight lines because that would really take away from the other organic parts. It would be too harsh. But as Karen was saying, like, so signifiers for, in a way, is sort of what you, like, I think the American flag kind of means something similar, at least to everyone, in a way of it's definitely a country. Everyone knows that. It's definitely a real place. It's definitely, you think of NASA, probably, I would imagine, unless maybe you're from somewhere foreign where you're not aware of it. But for most of us viewers, it does have like a grounding quality to it that way. So signifiers work that way, but they can be very dangerous because they doesn't necessarily mean the exact same thing to many people either. So it must be a very conscious decision when they're being used. And they can be ambiguous. Like, for example, we saw a lot of crows in the slideshow here. And crows mean different things to different people, but they are very like symbolic, I would say, as an animal, as opposed to some other animals that don't have concrete meaning all the time. All right, let's go to our next slide.
So I'm going to zoom through all of the next images and just point out one thing about them. So let's have the next slide. That's so people can get a chance to try this out. This is a marvelous symbolic image of when the world was permanently changing, somebody breaking out from the edge of the world that was refined. So the figure on the lower left. I just think it's a magnificent graphic. Next slide, please. This is Hannah Hinkman again, exploring the nation of motion and water with a poem. And this is her journal. If only we could do wonderful journals that look like this. Next slide, please. This is an example of eye flow. Where do I want people to look? At the symbol of the lighthouse, because I cherish and value the sailors and people who've lost their lives in order to make Long Island what it is. So this is a really clear use of eye flow and where I want the eye to go. And I do want it to land in a place and not move around. Next slide, please. This is Bannerman's castle, and it's an abandoned castle in the middle of the Hudson River that this man who was obsessed with collecting military equipment built. And the only thing to notice about this is the use of the print in order to point to the castle, which is now isolated and abandoned. It's a great story. We're not going to go there. Next. This is my favorite use myself of time. I was meditating on time. This happens to be the clock outside Grand Central Station, just at the top corner. And the lower image is of the inside of the clock as seen from inside when you get to go on the walkway. This just works for me because it was about COVID and time and how we are in time. And that's all you need to know about it. Kaitlyn, go for it.
Yes. So this is an image that I created for the Walt Women Initiative. They're another Walt Whitman association that they have wonderful online events as well. So definitely look them up after this. But this was for their 202nd birthday celebration for Walt Whitman. It's a Song of Myself marathon. And they were asking for submissions. And so what I created is this painting of Walt Whitman is its own painting, not in a virtual realm. It's a physical painting that I put into Photoshop, and then I basically cut out in Photoshop and then put on this image with the words and everything else around it. I also took that butterfly that's in Whitman's body and I cut it out and put it above him so he's actually looking at it. So that was actually in the process. That wasn't my original idea at all. That was just sort of a afterthought. But I also, the inspiration for this is Whitman's quote, "I contain multitudes." And I have so frequently thought about like how to visually talk about containing multitudes, which is everything. So those dandelions come back again for me because they sort of symbolize like birth to death very easily. And this is also their Zoom background for the next year, which is amazing. I love that it's behind all of them when they're having their Zooms, the entire initiative. Okay, and then quickly, I worked at a paint and sip and they asked me to do something that would sort of attract people to come through the door. So they're called conversation hearts. I'm sure everyone has seen them during Valentine's Day. And they're just kind of a fun way, but because they have text, they would make people stop at the door and sort of want to look in and know more. And then the big one is Let's Paint. I was thinking of David Bowie's Let's Dance with that one. All right. And I go back to Jean-Michel Basquiat here one more time. He was a graffiti artist. And you can see he has almost a checklist on the top left there. And you can see which of the following is omnipresent, present spelled with a Z. And the first one says Lee Harvey Oswald, and he has an X through that. Then there's Coca-Cola logo, General Millinery, and Samo, which was his own street name. So he's compiled a list. I mean, there's a lot of graffiti artists, and sort of we've all seen work by them, but his is just so intelligent and so interactive in a funny way that when you happen upon it, it keeps you there. It's not just a graphic, you know, it's again, a checklist. Who would think of that on a huge wall? And then you see him down here at the bottom as well. Okay, and then Keith Haring, contemporary of Basquiat. here I think he's doing a really successful job using just two colors. And again, we talk about values. We have the red as one value, the black writing as another value, and that's it. And again, the composition, the all around composition again, works really well. You can tell that he starts with the text and then works out from it. I'm sure there were sketches involved in this. Quick story, this is actually a racquetball court that was kind of abandoned at the time, and he really wanted to change the community he was living in New York City. So his paintings were selling for $50,000 at that time, and he just did this to reach out to the community. He just jumped in and did it. And he got arrested for actually making this mural, which is now a prized mural in New York City. So sometimes if your art's not appreciated, it's okay. It will be someday. All right, Karen, back to you.
This is Ken Krummenacker's wonderful postcard of Mary Oliver's quote, "Instructions for living a life, pay attention, be astonished, tell about it." There are so many things I love about this, but I just would like you to notice this as a possibility. Next slide, please.
Oh, Karen, I just want you had that Zazzle note on there.
Yes. If people are interested in Zazzle and how you turn your sketch into a postcard, I'll tell you later because I want to get, this is for friends of ours who have this blueberry shop in Maine. Talk about an icon, but I also added the Native Americans because it's indigenous land, and the guy who works it makes sure that the Native Americans are incorporated in his workers. This happens, the figure at the bottom is the man who owns it and has worked this land for generations. Next page. This is Kyuriku, who is a contemporary of Basho. I much prefer this to the other one just because I think the fragility of the calligraphy and the boldness of the crow in autumn communicates a great deal. Next slide, please. This is a triptych. It's based on mythology. It's called the Day of Remembrance in Japan. They were actually remembering the tsunami. They have it every year. Amaterasu is the goddess in the center panel, and she is the person you pray to in times of catastrophe. It also mimics the setup of a Japanese screen. Next slide, please. This is what it felt like to do art during COVID, sitting at my computer, wishing I were on Monet's boat. I keep an art journal about process, just because it's fun and I love it. Next slide, please. This is a story worth telling. Alejandro Cruz Martinez died preserving water rights for the people of this town. And the people who loved him so much, because in Oaxaca, Mexico, there's no water, and all the indigenous people have been taken off their land and they have no water. This is an indigenous story about a woman called Lucia Centeno who tried to protect the town. And this is an image that has been copied from the illustrator who worked with him. What happened in the city, because I'm big on artist social justice, is somebody found out about this and made a children's book and commissioned murals so that the memory of this man trying to save his indigenous people's lands would be in a children's book. Next slide, please. So here's your job. Pick a format. It can be the one you've been working on all night, a field journal, an illuminated art journal, reportage, and these are examples. That was the doctor picture, opposite page, a geometrically divided page, poster and mural, photo interpretation, the haiga, which is the meshing. So I'm just going to leave those up. You don't have to pick any of these. These are just some formats that lend themselves to words and graphics. Pick a format or invent one. Next slide, please. Choose what you want to say. You have 10 minutes. We cut it. 10 minutes. Decide where you're going to begin. Edit as you go. Commit to what you do, even if it doesn't please you. Go for it. See what you can let go of in order to finish something in 10 minutes. Have fun. And these we will talk about because we have the luxury of a small group. So we'll have time for people to individually mention what they were working on and questions they have at the end. It's all yours, people. Pull it all together in a 10 to 12 minute sketch, please. Let's say 10, and we'll give you some fluff. And Kaitlyn will answer anything in the chat that needs to be done.
Mhm.
Otherwise, hopefully you've been painting when we've been talking.
Nothing in the chat yet.
Good. Kaitlyn, I'm going to ask the thanks to go up
Okay.
because, and I am actually going to use your time and talk while this is going on. In my experience, without Kaitlyn, this process would never have happened because she and I make up for what the other most longs for. I also want to thank all of the people who have contributed to me learning this medium. Suzanne Cleary, magnificent poet who teaches me how to write and help me structure the class and make the choice to do more graphics than text. Barry Van Duzen, we've talked about my watercolor. Sherry Blockhoff, a person who is a wonderful painter and a member of Urban Sketchers and is all over the world, who has a great book on value and color, and is also my teacher and a dear, generous, wonderful woman. Ken Krumenacher, my husband, without whom nothing happens, who is a great cartoonist. My sister, Melinda Koyanis, whose art inspires me, who went all over Europe and Greece doing travel medallions and first inspired this way of working. Pete Dunn, my great writer, birder, dear, dear friend, who taught me how to see when I have no eyes and how to write and believed in my writing 30 years ago and showed me how to begin. Dr. Jeff Levine, who is the doctor who does all of these wonderful sketches and teaches me about art, life, and just about everything else. Writer Gerald Mundus, my writing mentor, who is sadly passed during COVID, who taught me how to get a 24 chapter book done and pointed to poetry as a form of rest and editing. Cynthia Reese, who has funded and supported and encouraged and helped pay for my work for the whole time period I've been doing. Jane Hirschfield, the great, great Buddhist poet who I met when she did a workshop at Whitman, who told me how to have boundaries and not try to do everything, and is deeply kind no matter what people throw at her. Natasha Trethaway, who's going to be at Whitman Birthplace next year. Ken and I met Natasha when we were in Savannah. She has written a series of poems. She's also the poet laureate this year. She does so much social advocacy. She's a mixed race poet, a glorious teacher, a great human being. Look her up. She is also sponsored by Poets and Writers, who is one of the sponsors of Whitman. Mark Leibowitz, who runs Urban Sketchers. If you don't know it, join it. You get to sketch twice a week. NYC Urban Sketchers, Mark and Suzala and Kathy Gutterman are great leaders. It's a way to be with people. Seatuck Writers Group, Noreen is a member, and they have taught me how to write. I once read a quote by Barbara Hurd, which is, if you don't have a writing buddy in a writing group, you'll never write anything. And Orion Magazine, Chip Blake is the editor, and he said a great thing that came up tonight when Kaitlyn was talking. All art is partially elegy. All art is elegy. We keep alive in the world the evidence that great spirits existed, and the Wild Branch writers, of whom I'm a member, who taught me how to write in a group when I couldn't do it alone. So the upshot of all of this noise is, unless you are succeeding in a solitary way, I encourage you to let people help you and thank them with incredible graciousness, because we are all figuring this out together, and it's a joyful journey if we do it as a group, in my experience. So you have another 3 or 4 minutes to finish up your sketches. And we have such a wealth in the people who are here that when you share, we're going to ask you to do it in a specific way, show whatever you want. You'll only have really about a minute. And we would recommend saying something you liked or learned. And if you have a question about where to go next, ask that at the end, and I will point you either when you share or after. But we would like people to talk about what worked, what they're pleased with about their work, and then a possible next step that you've decided you're going to do.
All right, I'm going to stop the screen share
Thanks,
too.
Caitlin.
One of our participants, Lauren Kashowski, actually had to leave a little early, but she sent me her images.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so sorry because we thought we'd have till 9.
Yes, but we can see her images, which is great.
Excellent.
Oh, these are great. I think I could just share these now. Maybe that would be.
Yes, but we should, because otherwise people might not get a chance to talk.
Yeah, and you can just take a look at them while you're working. 1 second, just save them. Save that one. Okay. All right, here's one.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, she has her own poem there too.
And the stress marks. It's like Gerard Manley Hopkins.
She was on our board of trustees. You can see she's a poet as well.
So stress marks are a wonderful way. Friend, why so quiet? You're a tool, such potential judgment. Weigh you down. Thanks. Caitlin.
Haikus are a whole other process. Self-editing process.
Work.
All right, I'm going to share the other one now. Let's see. And here's the other. I'll read this one too. It says, nourishment in my cup, once full of pencils, now my geography, my heart home, dirt so dry you crave water, drink in the mega top, the gorgeous red sand, drink. Wonderful.
What a fabulous, fabulous lingering sketch.
Yes.
Who's ready to share? Just because I would like, I really would. Who would like to share something about what they've done, their process, what they've learned, where they're going to go?
Everyone's always shy in the beginning, and then we get a lot of, then we want to keep talking once we start.
Okay, I'll talk because I don't really have any images to share, but I want to thank you both for giving me so many ideas. And I took notes throughout this whole thing, which is a really good idea. I'd like to learn more about Barry Van Duzen, the picture that he did in the wildlife sanctuary. So, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting ideas that you guys gave us. So I thank you so much.
Thank you. And Barry Van Duzen can be reached at just type his name into, and you will get not only his website, but you'll also get access to this incredible book, that's from a book about every wildlife sanctuary. I wish we could have one for Long Island, Carol Ann, but his is for Massachusetts. But if you type in his name on Google, and he's also in the bibliography that you will be sent. He also teaches privately, and let me tell you, it is worth a trip up there to hang with him.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Great man.
Okay.
Thank
I'll
you.
do that.
Who else would like to share something?
I was having fun. And
Yeah.
well, no. And I started with my 3 little sketches. And I thought that I liked the one with the sun. And when we went to the next step, the darks and lights, and it didn't work for me. So I started doing a larger one. And I think that really what I need to do when I want to incorporate letters and words is do the painting and then bring it into Illustrator and then add the text, because my handwriting so sucks. But I, again, had my own little sort of poem, and it follows the stem up, and then it ends up being planting itself, because it's, I forget what I wrote. Love breed plants itself where it needs be. And so
Oh,
that's
I love that.
Alex, I think that's a great solution for you, knowing you and loving you as I do. I would challenge that your handwriting sucks, because it really, but if that makes you happy, fine. What I do, just for those of you who do words, is I always put the words in pencil first, and then I erase it, and I trace them over, or I write them. So because I don't always want the words to be legible. Sometimes I do. Thank you. That was really
no, thank you. This is fun.
great. Somebody else. You can share questions or comments if you don't want to share your work. We get this.
You know what I'm also going to do is I'm going to put my email address in the chat. And if anyone wants to email it to me, because I have another one that was emailed to me actually too.
Ken, do you want to share yours? No, if
Come
nobody
on, Ken.
Oh, come on, Ken.
Okay.
So he's piggybacking, but he was testing out all the time.
I was testing out. I'm calling this "Be Patient with Impatience."
Right.
Wow.
Okay.
It's great. Love that composition too.
People can share their thumbnails too, or
Oh, Melissa, I see you hand up there. Yeah.
thanks, Melissa.
When I received the initial email to pick out a photo or a picture, I wanted to use one that I had taken as a photographer. So I did, and what it made me do was look at the photograph in a way that I might not have done if I was writing ekphrastically, just as a poet. And with the thumbnails remind me of what screenwriters do when they're storyboarding. So in a sense, what it did was it seemed like it warmed up my imagination to something that I didn't expect to happen, which is exactly what I wanted to happen. I wanted to unexpected. And it's ironic because it's a picture I took many years ago and I haven't been able to write about it, but I found a way in through this angle. So I thought that was great. So I want to thank you for that.
Melissa, I want to point you to two things, and thank you for just such a generous comment. Do you know Kathleen Donnelly's book, Palmanock?
Yeah, I'm in it. Which one?
The first one.
Yeah, I'm in the first one.
I'm so sorry I didn't recognize you, because
No, it's okay.
one of the great things about that book, which Ken and I read every day, the first one, is that some of the images, for those of you who don't know this, Palmanock is a collection of Long Island poets, of whom Melissa is one, and it's photographs. Sometimes the photograph's on one side usually, and the poem is on the other. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it really doesn't, because it makes the poem too literal. It narrows the expansiveness of what only poetry can do, which is resonances and associations. I do recommend that people work on it. The other thing I discovered about photography in words, Melissa, is we risk bad Hallmark or Trader Joe greeting cardville when we mesh poetry and language. And so I have found what you discovered, a rethinking of what was it about that photograph that stays with you years later that might be better captured in this particular medium.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So thanks for bringing up that question because it's one that stunned me. I felt that the book should work because it's such a gorgeous book. But I felt that sometimes the image and the poems were warring.
I think I actually I'm staring at the book here. I'm tempted to actually look at it, and I think I remember the photograph that she put next to the poem, and it kind of does work. But I know what you're saying. What I think of even more is Claudia Rankine's extremely incredible collection, Citizen.
Yes.
Which is,
Yeah.
you know, for those of you who don't know it, it's based on the Black Lives Matter movement. And the cover of it is just a gray hood, which is symbolic of Trayvon Martin, because that's what he was wearing when he died and was shot by Zimmerman. So I think it has to be carefully done. It has to be very, very carefully done. And I'm very happy that you brought up Keith Haring, because I kept thinking about him. And I remember my mother taking me to see one of his exhibits in the 80s in the Queen's Museum, you know, before he died. And he was such an important revolutionary, especially considering the fact that we had Reagan during those years. And, you know, with the AIDS epidemic hitting the West Village the way it did, and then obviously it turning into a pandemic. But so thank you.
Thank you. And also the question of whether we are doing this for ourselves in order to learn about ourselves and our lives. Mine is frankly a spiritual journey. That's the focus of all of my art. Whether we want to do it for social justice, whether we want to do it for fun, whether we want to do it as Ken does, send great postcards to the kids. It's a really, and they're not mutually exclusive. I'm aware that Ellen and Mary and a couple of people haven't shared. And in the last 10 minutes we have, is there anything, we're just so happy to have you here. Is there anything that, Carol-Ann, you did speak a little. Is there anything that people haven't shared yet would like to say, add, ask?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the postcard thing. You were going to tell us something about that?
Ken, can you, this question about Zazzle?
Yes, Zazzle.
Yes. And that you pay for it, but Ken will describe what he did because he's finally eating dinner.
Well, Zazzle.
Sorry.
What?
No, go for it, honey.
Oh,
What
Zazzle.
is that?
Zazzle. And when you click on the site, the first thing you need to do is go through the process of what you're looking for, postcards, regular cards, or whatnot. Then you need to download some of your work, which there's a place for that, and they guide you through that. And you download it, and then you can paste it onto the postcard or the regular cards or whatever. They have a whole option of things to do, and then you can play with it. You can make it smaller, bigger. You can Photoshop it. You can edit it. You can. It's a little difficult in the beginning, but in the end, you know, it's and the postcards I think were $1 a piece.
Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing that.
And I'm not sure if it's Zazzeel
No, Ellie.
or Le. It's it's Ellie.
Okay.
And we were turned on to this by Urban Sketchers because a lot of Sketchers are posting their images on postcards and send it. But you have a lot of options. Thanks for asking.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone, Mary?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love your work. Kaitlyn, I love your work. Just so inspiring, but I think there's kind of a hunger for this sort of, for artwork because the world we're in now is so not authentic. Everything is computer generated. And I think that's what's so powerful about seeing something that you did with paint and, you know, and a pencil, and it's, the beauty is just so original. So, I mean, I did rabbits that were in my backyard.
Yay!
Yeah, and
Oh, wow.
no, they really did not come out very well, but there's one there.
Oh, they're wonderful.
Oh, thank you. But I did like, I mean, if you did this class more often, this would be something I would probably, just throwing it out there. If you did this more often, I would probably join in, because it's so, it's just such unique art. And I love mixing art with words. And it's something that I think eventually I could get good at. I'm not good at it yet, but I think because I want to be good at it, maybe I could be. So it was a very encouraging night. And also the placement, when you talked about the placement of, like, when you were talking about maybe the butterfly or the cicada, speaking just about how placement has so much to do with the feeling. I felt like when I wrote to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower, and I was just drawing the little rabbit, but then I drew it above the little eye of the rabbit, and it was like the rabbit's thinking that, you know, it's not even me, it's like the little rabbit's thought. So it was just the placement of the word made it look so much different. So yeah, so there's just great lessons, but just if you went even more in depth and did it more often, I would join in. So, because I really loved tonight. Thank you very much.
Mary, I just want to thank you very quickly. We are doing this as a test because our feeling it's a workshop, actually we hope at the birthplace. But to do this well would take 3 full days or 4-hour days to even get people started.
Yeah.
I just want to mention something about the rabbits, which I found so beautiful and so dear. And this was hard for me because I spent the first several years of this so frustrated because I felt like it belonged on like the refrigerator door because my parents loved me. I really did.
Yeah.
And then I realized that I loved the learning so much that if my rabbit didn't turn out, I just loved trying to figure out why it didn't turn out, and I liked it anyway. And I did fall in love with my own process.
Yes.
And if for no other reason, this is something that Kaitlyn and I have talked about. We're like that sandpiper. Poor bird, he's obsessed. We're both pretty obsessed. But thank you. And this was our hope, is that we can do this in an extended format because it's a new hybrid art form. It's only now being treated in poets and writers and in writers' books and in artists' books. So thank you. We're going to close up, but does anyone, who else wants to just say something? This was just such a wonderful night. What a present. But is there anyone else who'd like to add before we?
Sure. I'll just say thank you so much. It has been fascinating. I am a novice. I was looking for inspiration. I certainly found it. Your work and Kaitlyn's is amazing. I took copious notes, and I have so many, the knowledge was amazing too. So I have so many people I'll be looking up, and I didn't know what to expect from this evening, but it was wonderful. And honestly, I find all the programs at Walt Whitman just really excellent. So thank you. Thank you.
And tell us about you.
I'm a retired English teacher. And I often say I'm not really a writer, I'm a reader, and I loved sharing reading. But now in retirement, I am turning some attention to writing. Over a period of 20 years, I've done some watercolor, and I've never really jumped in. And so it's been enjoyable and frustrating. And so you got me thinking, do I want to jump in more? So again, thank you. It was really a fabulous evening.
Ken has a box of prang paints that I gave him for about $8, and he churns out the most magnificent stuff. Jump in. It's what we never got to do, especially when we were teaching.
Yeah.
We never thought to do what we most love. which is learn, draw, play. Because in my experience as a teacher, I was always taking care of my students. So thank you for joining us and for your great generosity.
Thank you.
I love the cattail.
That's Pepper. That's Pepper. You had to get in there. That's Pepper.
Hi, Pepper.
Recording of this.
Say it again.
Can they access the recording of this?
Yes. I also want to share, we got 2 email submissions, so I want to share those
Oh,
quickly.
yes, let's.
And then we'll open up one more time if anyone else wants to share. I know it's always a little rush at the end, but
I'm fine. I'm in heaven.
go all night, cup of coffee.
As Blake said, this. Wow.
Here's first our digital one. It's amazing. This is by Gianna Gonzalez. She's our bookkeeper at the Walt Whitman Birthplace daughter, and she's very talented. She really is, and she does mostly digital work like this. I don't know how she did this so quickly. This seems like so much more time consuming to me, but
Caitlyn, would you read this, please? Because you have good eyes.
yes. It says, under the warmth of a cherry blossom tree, orbs of light shine. It's only me. I take in the breeze. I finally feel free. Beautiful.
What a great use of multimedia. Wow. Great. She is talented.
Yes.
Everybody's talented.
Michelle has her artwork as her Zoom picture all the time. It's always changing because she's an impulsive maker. And so she impresses me with the amount of work that she puts out. So, good job, Gianna, if you're listening. All right, now I'm going to share one more that was emailed to me. This is from my mom, actually, Maureen.
Wow. Oh,
great thumbnails. She doesn't believe me, but I definitely get some talent from her. I can see it. I remember doing little projects with her. This.
I don't know why she doesn't believe you. This is Barry Van Dusen would be pleased. All of the intersection points of the flowers are right.
Yes.
How the leaves insert in. What a great sense of shape.
Yes, and those sketches are great. There's so many different ways of looking at the same flower and finding a new way of portraying it.
Great.
Yes. All right.
Hey, Mom.
Yes. Shout out for sure. And do we have anyone else who, because we are recording this, so it's great to have a lot of different ones. Even if you just want to hold it up, you don't have to talk if you don't want to. Just so we have them all here in our recording.
Oh, look. Oh, Maureen.
I was thinking of the quote that you sent, and I was going to work with the butterfly, and that's how the butterfly. But in the past day or two, my neighbor said, you know that tree in the corner? I wish you'd take it down, because when the wind blows, the little berries or whatnot, some of them fall in my yard. And I love the tree, and I don't know why, but in the middle of the drawing, I started making this tree, and on the one side I wrote, only God can make a tree, so only God can kill a tree. Putting in, some tears and eyes, and I was going to put in a nest down below because it wouldn't have a home in the tree anymore. So I just went off on a tangent.
This is the whole purpose of the night. The tangent we went off on is just so moving. My husband is on the tree commission, spends his days trying to encourage people to save trees. This is what he does. And they're up and down. I was so moved by that, Nora. That is not a tangent. That's what the workshop is pointing to. Is how do we take the time to just stop and connect to our life as we live it? What a wonderful experience to.
Because all day, that's all I've been thinking about. Wanting to be a good neighbor and wanting to save a tree.
Right.
Yeah, well, it's going to go on. It is your tree, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
why does this person want to cut down?
Because it gets some little berries on it. And before the berries come out, little flowers, like blossoms may come out. When the wind blows, they blow into her yard. And
It's keeping her grass alive.
well,
Which,
she says she has to clean the skimmers of her pool because they fall in the pool. And
oh, that's her job. I can't go off on this. I'm sorry. I'll be on
Yes.
a side.
That's life.
it's
Yes.
breaking my heart because I had a few years ago, I mostly write poetry. I wrote a poem about the tree. I call it the leaning tree because it kind of leans over.
Oh,
And I feel like the tree and I grew old together. We're both leaning right now. And so I'm very
can't cut that.
attached to the tree.
Maybe you
can't
should
cut that.
read her that
I'm
poem and
sure-
show her what you drew.
Mhm.
Oh,
Oh,
Melissa,
Good
good
idea.
idea.
Better not cut that down.
I was gonna say,
Do not
unsolicited
cut that down.
advice, you save that tree, but I like what Melissa said. You might start with trying to reach her emotionally first, but
She'll never bother you again. She won't.
Do you know The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Okay. I agree with Melissa. Totally. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I didn't think I was going to be able to do much because I'm not an artist at all. And then it just came. So
It does. Whoever told you you weren't an artist was so wrong, and it was a mauling and of your very soul. They were wrong. I'm sorry it happened to you. You are. You are.
well, thank you.
You're also an
Appreciate
incredible
it.
storyteller, and I suspect poet. So they were wrong. Forget them. Hang out with us.
Picasso has a
It's
quote.
certainly enjoyable.
Picasso has a quote that to the effect that if you think you're not an artist, pick up a paintbrush and pick up a piece of paper and you're an artist.
ah, right.
My friend Jerry Mundis, the great writer, said here's how you become a writer. Put your butt in a chair and put down some words. And if you can't put down words, cry. Then you're a writer.
I've been doing that a lot over the tree.
Oh.
Now, did we miss anyone? Did anyone not get to share who wanted to share? Give it a second of breathing room here if you want to chime in. All right, I think everyone got to share. Here's what I would love though, is as we're talking, I'm thinking if you would like to email me with your images, you can just take a quick cell phone picture. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. You can send them to me. I'd love to share them on Facebook. They can be anonymous. I can add your name. It's totally up to you. But it's just nice for people to see like what's coming out of this workshop. And then you can also write if you would be interested in doing a longer workshop, a series like we have been discussing before. This was sort of our test run, as Karen was saying, and it came up naturally that this would be a wonderful series. So I'm hoping we can do something like that in the fall. And maybe what days and times work. I know I don't want to give you too much of a homework assignment right now, but if you think about that, that'd be great. I'm so impressed. I know Karen is too, just what came out of this. You know, you go about planning something, but then people bring their own work and their own mind and ideas to things. I love that conservation is coming up in many ways. I think of the word mindfulness. I always think of that word because that comes into poetry and that comes into images all the time. Mindfulness of meditating on an object and sort of whatever creative things come out of it. So that definitely happened a lot here tonight. And Karen, I'm going to hand things over to you too. Any final thoughts?
No, just a thank you, because without Kaitlyn, recognizing the George Floyd image, this would never have happened. And this has been such a joyful learning process. We're both pretty exhausted because of our lives, but every time we got to be together, I was nourished and fed. And I just thank you enormously for having the skill and patience and wherewithal to do this. It was a great gift. And for all of you who attended, we can't thank you enough, because you create the art loop. We make it, you see it, you make it, we see it. So it's like breathing itself. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. You know what I want to do is a big round of applause, not just for Karen for joining us and doing all this work too with us, but also just for all of us here who put work into it, who tried something new, who did an experiment tonight. I think a big round of applause is very due for that.
Win-win for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to put some links in the chat. And I put my email in there. So I'd love to hear from you, not just for this event, anytime. I love hearing from everyone and their thoughts and ideas. Some of our event ideas purely come from people emailing us. So, and once again, Karen, amazing. I mean, I can't imagine working this many hours on something with anyone else. So it came together so beautifully. And you had a vision for the actual workshop. I was happy to throw things in there, but your vision came through for how this would actually flow. So I'm just so happy with how it came out as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And I have those links coming up.
Thank you. You guys are awesome.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you so much. All right, here's these links in case you need them. And again, there's so many great videos on our YouTube. Mary C.M. Phillips, and of course, Karen Demaro as well. Karen's poetry and performance video, you can check that out. And I have the link in the chat there, you can check that out. All right, hopefully you get that. I don't know. Well, I'm going to be sending you all an email with the bibliography, as Karen mentioned. So that'll be a reminder too, if you want to send me anything.
Okay, nice.
All right, hopefully you got those links. Please stay connected with us. We love it. Thank you again, Karen, so much. And I hope you have a nice rest now, Karen. I hope everyone else too, a nice relaxing weekend coming up. We all need that to recharge our batteries a little bit. All right, have a great night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Yes,
Thank
be
you.
safe, be well.